Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and today we're going to have a tutorial on Krita, specifically on the Assistant tool. The Assistant tool is the most powerful drawing tool I have ever had in my life. So here is the Assistant tool right where my cursor is. It's shaped like a square, okay? Now a square is a tool that's shaped like this, and it's used by people like architects, draftsmen, contractors, construction workers, and such like that. So, you know, that's generally how it's used, but the Assistant tool does more than that. Now, in order to use the Assistant tool, you have to have the Tool Options Docker. Now, in order to access the Tool Options dock, you need to go to Settings, Dockers, and go to Tool Options right here. And then you'll have this free floating window right here. Let's go ahead and hover it over the Advanced Color Selector, and it'll be right up here, easily accessible with all of your other stuff. Okay, so it has a drop-down menu here. Now, I'm going to cover what's actually here on the Tool Options right here. I'm going to create a whole bunch of these really quickly, okay? Now, you don't need to know what these are right now at this moment. But if you have a whole bunch of these assistants going on all over your screen and such, and there's just too many of them, you can click on this All button, and that'll get rid of all of them, okay? But let's say you have a bunch of them that you actually really want to keep, because let's say you're at the end of a masterpiece, but you don't know if there's going to be some point in time when you might need to use this exact same set of assistants again. So you can go ahead and click on this little Save button right there, and you can go ahead and call it Delete Me, okay? And then I can go ahead and delete them all. Let's say I'm in the middle of finishing up the whole process of my masterpiece, and then I'm like, oh shoot, I need my assistants back. Well, I click on this folder button, and then I go to my delete me file and open it, and there they are, easily accessible, okay? So let me go ahead and get rid of these. Okay, so right now we're on the concentric ellipse. The concentric ellipse is really kind of cool because you can kind of just click 3 times. You click once, click twice, click 3 times. And if you want to have a perfect circle, you don't need to, by the way, but if you want a perfect circle, you can go ahead and grab one of these handles after you've created it and press shift, and then you grab this other handle and press shift, and then let go of your cursor basically. Now when I pull out my brush, what happens is if I try to draw the circle, I'm just freehanding it. Now this may frustrate some people, but rest assured, if you click on this snap to assistance button or checkbox, you can go ahead and draw with the concentric ellipse. It doesn't really matter where your cursor is, it will follow the ellipse as best as it can. Now, it does have some little jittery little mistakes if you don't try to follow the guide at least a little bit, but generally, as long as you're trying to follow your cursor with the guide, you don't have anything to really worry about with that. So what is this thing used for? Well, you know, it might be useful to maybe make something like a blur on a windshield. Okay, let's just go ahead and do that, okay? Now, another thing, when you want to snap or unsnap your assistant, you can actually press Control-Shift-L, okay? Which is really helpful, being able to just press Control-Shift-L and you're able to draw with the assistant. Then Control-Shift-L, you're able to freehand it. So that's really, really useful, not having to bring your cursor all the way over here and turn it on and turn it off, turn it on, draw a little bit, turn it off. It is really frustrating to do that. So Control-Shift-L. Now, I'm able to pull out this raker blending tool, and I'm able to press Control-Shift-L, and I'm able to kind of do this thing where I'm trying to make something that looks a bit like mud on a windshield. And this, you can actually have a fair amount of success doing this, and there you have it. You know, that could be the beginnings of mud on a windshield or what have you. It could be any number of different things. Let's go ahead and grab the assistant. Now, in order to get rid of the assistant, you can go ahead and press on that button right there. It's usually associated with no smoking symbol. Now, if I go ahead and click on this eyeball, you'll notice that the assistant got darker. And if I pull out my brush and start trying to draw with it, for right now, since I have the snap assistance turned on, it's not really working. Let's press Control-Shift-L. I'm able to draw freely. Control-Shift-L. Okay, sometimes it doesn't behave like this. Sometimes I'm able to draw freehand, but in this specific case, the program is a little confused. So let me plot the brush. Let's see. Yeah, see, it's confused as to what it wants me to do. So most of the time, if you have your assistant turned off, it just completely ignores the assistant 100%, but not in this case. It's like some sort of glitch that I ran into. So if you click and drag on these arrows here, you're able to move your assistant. So this can be pretty helpful if you need multiple different types of dartboards or whatever it is that you need inside of your picture. You can kind of compose a little bit of something going on there that might be helpful. So let's go ahead and get rid of the assistant. Okay, now the next one is the ellipse. Now the ellipse is pretty similar to the concentric ellipse, except that it only draws exactly where your ellipse is created, where your assistant is. It doesn't make anything else beyond that. This circle right here, I'm only able to draw in that circle when I have my assistant snapped. Now there's more to some of the settings with the assistant. Now notice this, when I pull out my brush, then I pull out my assistant, if I don't have an assistant selected, this whole area is completely empty. But once I click on the assistant, suddenly this opacity meter shows up. Now I can go ahead and change the color of my assistant, and you can see that it turned blue. But that's really dark, and it is obtrusive, so maybe I might want to lower the opacity. That's pretty handy. Now I pull out the brush, and now I'm able to kind of see what I'm drawing. So like if I had a really small brush, being able to actually see what's going on with that really small brush is really helpful. So that is the ellipse assistant. I don't use it very often, but it is handy. Now one thing to note is once you move an assistant, you can press Ctrl Z a few times, but it's just going to affect brush strokes. It's not going to do anything with an actual assistant. You can't undo a movement with your assistant. So make sure that if you're doing something with your assistant, that it is exactly what you want. Because there is no going back unless you've saved it. So if you're working on a masterpiece for 100 hours or so, make sure you save the assistant before you start messing around with it. Okay, so that's really important to note. Alright, so the next assistant is the Fisheye Point. Okay, now the Fisheye Point, you click once, you click twice, you click a third time. Now normally with the Fisheye assistant, you need to grab these handles, press shift, in order to make a perfect circle. And when you create the assistant, it creates some interesting shapes and stuff. And there's a lot of people that don't know how to use fisheye perspective, but I do. I even have a playlist on my channel all about curvilinear perspective, and it's extremely useful. People have managed to use the rules of topography in order to construct a 3D image as if it's perspective, and it's really quite amazing what some people have created using it. Right now it just looks like something weird and fancy that I put on the screen. I'll kind of describe a little bit about it inside of this video, but I plan on talking about perspective a lot more in the future, but I'm not planning on getting too in-depth with it in this video. Besides, I have the curvilinear perspective on my channel. There's a card up at the upper corner of the screen right now if you want to see that specific playlist on how to draw panoramic images. So let's go ahead and get into the next assistant, parallel ruler. Now the parallel ruler is my favorite ruler. Okay, now after creating a ruler, you click once, you click twice, and that's it. If you want it perfectly vertical, you press shift. If you want it perfectly horizontal, you press shift. Okay, so with the parallel ruler, you're able to create lines that are perfectly parallel to one another. And this is really powerful, being able to draw parallel lines. Now, parallel lines, what are parallel lines? A parallel line is at least two lines that could potentially go on forever and ever and ever, okay? And they will never crisscross. They will never intersect. This will never happen with a parallel line, okay? So that's really important to understand about parallel lines, especially when I get further on in the video and I start talking a little bit about perspective. I'm not going to teach everything about perspective in this video. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. The next one is the perspective. Now, the perspective assistant is really kind of cool. You click 4 times and it actually creates something that behaves like a plane, like a flat object, as if it's in 3-dimensional space. Now, I usually use this on specific objects that I've already drawn out in perspective. If I grab straight from the middle handle on one of these assistants, I'm able to create another assistant that's attached to it. It's parented to it. So if I grab one of these corner ones and start moving it around, you can see that it's affecting both of the assistants. And so that's really powerful to be able to do. And I'm able to kind of use this assistant in order to actually kind of sculpt an object, and then later on I'm able to really kind of add a lot of details to that object. For example, let's say I were to kind of start drawing on this set of guides here. I'm able to quickly kind of draw out a sketch on this thing, and it only allows me to draw really effectively right where these perspective guides are. It doesn't matter if I have other guides on the canvas. In fact, if you plan on using this assistant and you have other kinds of guides on the screen, you might want to deactivate them. Not necessarily delete them, but to deactivate them so that you can work with the perspective assistant a little bit more effectively. So within a short period of time, I'm able to create this shape that for some reason it just, it makes me feel as if I'm in the presence of, I don't know, something like a companion. There's something about this shape. It's really compelling to me. I don't know. It's so strange. It's so compelling for some reason. Deleted! Ha 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 ha! So we got the ruler. Now the ruler is nothing really that special. Basically, I just create a ruler and it only draws a line exactly where that ruler is. Okay, nothing too substantial. It doesn't exceed past the ruler. It just draws exactly what's there on the ruler.
Yeah, that's right. I don't care about the companion cube.
That's it. There are occasions where you might need this, especially if you have a lot of exact details that you need to have, but I haven't really needed to use this very often. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this assistant and move on to the next one. The next one is the spline. You click once, you click twice, and then you have a handle that you get to control. And you go ahead and control that handle, and then you have another handle, and then you click again. Okay, so a total of 4 clicks, and you have it. And it really helps you be able to create some really nice custom shapes. And this really helps where you have a situation where you need to make a bunch of identical shapes, and you need them to be pretty exact and such like that. So if you're kind of coming up with sketches for logos and stuff like that, I don't necessarily recommend that you use Krita for that. You need something more like Affinity Designer or Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape or something like that. But if you're just sketching out logo designs and such like that, this can be really quite powerful in order to create logos and such. But I've only needed to use it maybe 2 or 3 times in the past. Not very often, and so it is what it is. And the last assistant is the vanishing point. You click once and you have a vanishing point. And once you go ahead and lock your brush to this guide, it just basically has every line intersect at a specific point. Now, what is the use of that? For some people, they don't know. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about perspective at this point in time, because it's important that people actually recognize the power of the assistant tool. I constantly have people tell me,
"Oh wow, you're using features inside of Krita that I didn't even know existed."
It's just the assistant tool. That's all it is. It's just the assistant tool. Let's go ahead and pull out the parallel ruler, okay? Let me go ahead and make sure that it's perfectly straight up and down, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw a bunch of vertical parallel lines. Okay, so I've drawn out a bunch of parallel vertical lines. Nothing special, right? Well, let me pull out the transform tool, and I'm going to do something here. I'm going to go ahead and pull these lines closer to one another right here at the top. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and bring these lines at the bottom out. Okay? Now, I want you to visualize as though these are still parallel lines. Okay? I don't want you to think of them as lines that are getting closer to each other. When I press enter, it kind of looks like these lines are going off towards the distance. And if these lines were to just keep on continuing, they would just kind of intersect right about here, right? But they don't, because Because like I said, I want you to visualize these lines as being parallel. Because when you're dealing with perspective, lines that come from what's called the vanishing point, this point right here, lines that come from the vanishing point are parallel, okay? If you had a series of railroad tracks, this line and this line would never intersect on those railroad tracks, right? Well, alright, let's go ahead and draw some railroad tracks all the way to and from that vanishing point, okay? Let's just go ahead and do that and see if it looks like these parallel lines are going off towards the distance, okay? I'm going to go ahead and use the assistant tool, and I'm going to go ahead and use another parallel ruler, and I'm going to make this perfectly horizontal, okay? That way I can quickly draw out the horizontal bits of the railroad, okay? Alright, so that actually does look like it goes off towards the distance. Let's try some other technique, okay? Let's go ahead and lower the opacity on this layer. Let's go ahead and use that assistant, okay? So that I don't have to draw every line going to and from that vanishing point, okay? Because that could get really annoying really quick, okay? So I have a vertical assistant, a horizontal assistant, and I have my vanishing point assistant. Okay, let's go ahead and just draw out a square. Okay, alright. Let's see if we can make this into a box. Let's have lines go off towards the distance, you know, as if these lines are coming to you or away from you. Okay, let's see if drawing lines towards the vanishing point does that. Okay. Well, this box just looks like it stretches on towards infinity. It looks like it just stretches on towards this vanishing point, or if anything, it looks more like a cone almost, except it doesn't end with a circle. That's weird, right? So let's go ahead and end this box. Alright, let's go ahead and erase what we don't need, alright? Because there's no reason to keep all the extra sketchy lines that we don't need. Alright, so now we have a box. Can we make a house? Let's take a look and see. So let's go ahead and press Ctrl-Shift-L and draw out the bottom portion of the house so that we can just get something. Okay, I'm going to freehand this for the roof, and now I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-L in order to draw the lines that are facing us. Okay, and yeah, you know what, that kind of looks like a house, right? Looks like a 3D house. Let me get rid of the lines that are in the background. See, we have 3D objects. Isn't that cool? So one thing to note about one-point perspective is that with one-point perspective, there will always be faces that are facing you, okay? In contrast, there's two-point perspective. Let me go ahead and pull out my assistant tool. I have vanishing point selected, so I'm going to go ahead and click here and click here. Let me go ahead and get rid of this assistant. Two-point perspective is really unique because I'm able to just draw a line, and that's the portion of the object that is facing me, okay? And then I draw from that line to the left vanishing point. And I do the same thing again at the bottom of that line. And then I do the same thing to the right vanishing point. Okay, well, let's go ahead and draw a vertical line right about right here. And let's draw a vertical line right about here. Okay, so this is resembling more like a book at this point. Let's make it into a box. Let's make it into some sort of box, okay? So let's go ahead and draw a line from here to the right vanishing point and draw a line from here to the left vanishing point. Alright, and now I can just go ahead and erase what I don't need. So now we have two types of perspective. We have one-point perspective that created these shapes, and I have two-point perspective that created this shape. Now ultimately, you may be thinking, oh, I want to know more, I want to know more. And yes, I can teach you more, but the problem is it gets to the point where it becomes math. And math is not fun. I want you to experiment with cubes and such like that. I want you to try turning cubes into other objects, because ultimately, when you're drawing in perspective, everything starts out as a cube, okay? So let's move on to the next bit of information. I'm going to get rid of all of this that I worked on, and then move on to the fisheye point. Okay, we talked about this earlier. The fisheye point is interesting because I click here, and I click here. Okay, I'm going to make this into a perfect circle. Now, in order to draw with fisheye perspective, you need more than one guide. So this represents the vertical lines, and you can see that because this line is going straight up and down. And then I click here and click here and here, okay? And now I'm just going to go ahead and make this a perfect circle, and I'm going to try to get these two to match up. And now I'm going to create a vanishing point assistant, and I'm going to move it right into place right at the center. Okay, now like I said earlier, I do have a curvilinear perspective playlist on my channel, and I teach a lot more than this inside of that series. So I press Ctrl-Shift-L, and I'm able to make a box that is floating in the air using this set of assistants, and it's absolutely invaluable. Now, why would you want to draw like this? Some people may ask. Well, your assistants don't necessarily have to be on your canvas. They just happen to be in this specific case. But more than that, this image is a full 180 degrees. These sets of perspective guides that I've created with the assistant tool is ultimately 180 degrees. Whereas with linear perspective, with 1-point perspective and 2-point perspective, you're limited to the grand maximum of 60 degrees of viewing angle, which is less of a viewing angle than what you get when you're looking around in the world with both of your eyes with depth perception. So you can get some really interesting shapes because of curvilinear perspective. And you may think to yourself, yeah, but the world doesn't really look like this. But doesn't it? I mean, you get a wide-angled lens and it starts to curve the world, starts to curve the image. It's not that the wide-angled lens is distorting reality. It's just that there comes a point to where reality is contradicting the way the world is perceived with two eyes perceiving it. So curvilinear perspective is more accurate to what actually exists in the world, regardless of whether or not you have two eyes to see it. It more so resembles like how a fly would perceive its environment, because those creatures are able to have a much wider viewing angle of the world. Now, when I draw this center cube, only two faces are facing us, whereas with all the other cubes, you'll notice that there's at least 3. Now, you gotta be careful with cubes that are like this one, okay? It's really important that you're careful of cubes like that one, because if you don't have the context of a cube like this one or this one right here may not make any sense whatsoever, okay? So you need to make sure that when you're working with perspective, your composition makes it so that a cube like this one will make sense. Alright, so that is the assistant tool, and that is some of the most powerful things I've ever seen inside of any type of software. The assistant tool is the most powerful drawing tool I have ever had in my life. But since you guys have been with me this entire time, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a bonus fact. Now, I have covered this bonus fact in a previous video, but seeing as though 50% of you guys don't know how to use a vanishing point, I'm pretty sure none of you guys saw the Curvilinear Perspective series, where I covered this information. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this fact once again. Now, if I go on to Google and type in Dutch angle, and look at the images, you'll notice that all of these images are tilted. This guy's head is not 100% straight up and down. Spock's head is not 100% straight up and down. The horizon here is not perfectly level. It's not perfectly left and right. So Dutch angles sometimes make a really interesting angle. Look at this image of this bench here. I mean, it's just a bench, and yet since it's at a Dutch angle, since it's angled in a way where it's not perfectly aligned with the edges of the picture, it looks interesting. And so I don't recommend that every single image that you draw be at a Dutch angle, but there are occasions where a Dutch angle is just that one little thing that makes your composition perfect. So when I told you about the parallel ruler, I told you how to get a ruler that's perfectly vertical, and I taught you how to make a ruler that's perfectly horizontal. But if you have a Dutch angle where your horizon is at this angle, how do you make sure that this is at a perfect 90 degrees? This your vertical assistant is at a perfect 90 degrees. How do you do that? Do you just guess? You can, but I would highly suggest that you don't. Okay, I'm going to use my horizontal Dutch angled parallel ruler assistant in order to create a line. Really quick here. Okay? Alright, so I drew out that line. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull out another assistant. This one is the ellipse, okay? And I'm going to make it into a perfect circle, and you can see there's a crosshair in the middle of the ellipse. And I'm going to move that crosshair right there on this line that I drew. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw a perfect circle using my ellipse assistant. And then I'm going to move this ellipse assistant over. Now, when I move it, I'm going to make sure that there's still overlap with my existing circle. I'm going to make sure that my ellipse assistant is perfectly centered on this line. And then I go ahead and draw out the circle once again. Now, if you notice, I've just created a crosshair that exists right here and right here. This is what I need in order to have a 90 degrees. So at this point, I can go ahead and get rid of all of my assistants if I want. I can go ahead and create my horizontal Dutch angled horizon assistant right here. And then I can go ahead and create my vertical assistant right here. And I'm just going to make sure that it is perfectly centered on that crosshair. Alright, and now I can go ahead and get rid of all of these guidelines that I needed in order to make my 90 degrees. So I'm going to move my assistants off of the canvas, and I'm going to go ahead and just create a vanishing point right here, and I can go ahead and start drawing out an image in perspective at a Dutch angle and have it so that everything is perfectly aligned so that my vertical lines look like they're vertical lines and my horizontal lines are horizontal lines. Like I said, the most powerful tool I've ever had with artwork is in Krita, and it's called the Assistant tool. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to get more notifications from me, feel free to click on the bell or go ahead and follow me on Twitter. And if you guys would like to see more of my content, feel free to click on anything that you see appearing on the screen right now. Thank you so much for your time.